Our final section is on professional development. Many of the SENCOs on the National Award are new SENCOs, very keen for their professional development and for that of their staff. And they had a number of questions in this area. The first one is, do you feel that SENCOs should be more concerned with building up their knowledge, their specialist knowledge of special needs and disabilities, or with their expertise in skills in leading and coordinating other staff?
I can quite safely say that I think it should be about coordinating and moving the SEN forward in the school, not about developing their own sort of interests or building up their knowledge of different types of SEN. I think the bit about the SEN you can pick up, you can find from various places. The bit that SENCOs have really got to get to grips with is how they can support and manage everybody in their school, supporting all children. I think we've had too long where schools have expected SENCOs to have all the answers for every different type of need in the school, and just be able to go into a classroom and say, right, we're doing this, this and this, and the children are cured, and that's never going to happen. But I think if we have somebody who is strategically leading all staff, who are all teachers of children with special needs, in that way forward, then actually that's far more important than them knowing everything there is to know about dyslexia or autism.
The next question is very specific from one SENCO in a secondary school. She says that she's responsible for line management of an excellent team of teaching and learning support assistants, 3 of them higher level teaching assistants. Their knowledge of the children and their special needs is excellent, but the teachers don't currently have that level of knowledge. And she wondered whether you think this is a problem or not, and what her priority should be in terms of professional development for the whole staff.
I think this is a national problem, because I think that because we have employed large numbers of support staff in our schools supporting children with special needs, we have upskilled many of these, especially our higher level teaching assistants, to meet the needs of individual children. So we have some highly qualified autism specialists or dyslexia specialists, and teachers just have not had that knowledge within their training. So I think there's 2 aspects here. I think the first one is about working with teachers to work effectively with their teaching assistants or their support staff, because I think there's, it's not about feeling threatened by it. It's actually about getting the best out of the 2 people that are in that classroom at any one time, and using that knowledge and that skill for the best for the children. I also think the second level of that is to upskill the teaching workforce in terms of their knowledge of special needs and their knowledge of individual needs, and not about hours and hours on why is a child autistic and what does that mean, but actually how can we develop our teaching, our strategies, our environment to make it easier for that child to learn. So I think it's a 2-way process. It's about upskilling the teaching workforce in terms of their professional development, but it's also about working with teachers to understand that there isn't a threat because these teaching assistants have got more knowledge in certain areas, but actually they are a huge resource that we need to be using more effectively.
And it's quite a challenge, that, isn't it, in some schools, the number of teachers for a SENCO. Where would you suggest they start in that process? Okay,
I think the starting point in that process is actually looking at whole school staff development. And one of my big worries is that we have large numbers of teachers in our schools who have not had good SEN professional development. We've seen a huge change in the sort of children that we now have in schools. I would have been teaching over 30 years, and the children in schools today are very different to the children who were there 30 years ago. But actually, there are many teachers who came into teaching when I did, who maybe have had no professional development on how to now change their teaching style or about learning styles of individual learners. So I think the SENCO needs to be thinking about how can they impact on whole school staff development. So upskilling all the staff, including the support staff, but then working with the teaching staff to look at, you know, how the support staff are being used in school, how are those needs of those children being met through that support staff, is that effective, are there other ways we can be using that sort of work, are there teachers who could work in a team teaching situation that actually would have more effect. It's just looking at, you know, what are the processes in school and are they working? And that comes back to the SENCO having that leadership role and that strategic direction, because they can see in a holistic way where are the issues. And at a secondary school level, you know, it might be one department or it might be one particular year group where there are some real challenges. And as the SENCO, you need to be able to be looking at those departments, looking at those individual needs within the teaching and learning workforce, and how can you best work with that particular group. And that might be about, you know, there's another department that's doing it really, really well, and let's, you know, sort of showcase what they're doing to try and roll that out across the school.
Do you think that there should be an inset day each year at least devoted to, I mean, not just thinking while you're talking there, you know, I was getting an idea of how an inset day could be organised.
Yeah, I mean, I would personally say there should be at least one day a year that is dedicated to inclusion, additional needs, special needs, whatever we want to call it, but that is looking at that sort of how we are adapting our curriculum and our teaching to meet the needs of that most vulnerable group of young people. And as mainstream schools get more and more complex children, mental health issues, children, you know, who've got issues that we've never seen before, how are we meeting those young people's needs? And we've got to do that through a whole school training day, and then maybe sort of smaller in-service type evening sessions for smaller groups.
The next one is around newly qualified teacher induction. And this SENCO in a primary school says that he has 3 newly qualified teachers in his school this year. He knows that as SENCO he needs to be working with them, and wondered if you had any suggestions for worthwhile activities that the SENCO could do, and what the best timing would be in terms of their induction year. They're quite early on in the year at the moment, in September. What advice would you have for working with them throughout their year of induction?
I think SENCOs need to recognise that newly qualified teachers have very, very limited knowledge of special needs. Although there is a module within the initial teacher training programme, it's not mandatory. So it's very much up to the institution where they've done their QTS as to how much actual impact that's had. And if you've got a PGCE student as a newly qualified teacher, they may not have had any SEN information at all, apart from what they've picked up on their practice. So I think literally from day one, the SENCO needs to be involved with those newly qualified teachers, working with them alongside them in their classrooms. I think it's really important that the SENCO knows the children that those NQTs are going to be teaching, and is able to straight away talk to them about individual needs of the most, you know, the most vulnerable, and give them some pointers in terms of, it might just be about the environment. You know, if it's somebody who's got hearing impairment, make sure they're at the front of the classroom. If it's a visual impairment, you know, and just some very, very simple classroom management strategies that would be good for all children, but actually would be very relevant for the children in their class. And then I think it is about finding some time, and again, going back to my, you know, if you're full-time class-based, I understand that's difficult, but finding some time to be able to work alongside the NQTs, or to make sure that when the NQTs are getting some time, they can go and visit the classrooms where there's good practice going on for children with special needs. It's also about making sure that the newly qualified teacher understands how to work with support staff who may be in their classrooms, because again, in the initial teacher training programme, there is very little about how to work with other people in your classroom. And you know, when they're planning, to make sure that the planning encompasses the planning for any support staff, and what the outcomes for those young people are alongside the outcomes for the rest of the class. So I think it's from day one, or even before that, before they arrive. It's about making sure they have that the NQTs have all the information they need about the children they've got in their classroom, and then it's about making sure that on a day-to-day basis they've got the support and the help they need. Especially, I suppose, if there's children with emotional, social behavioural difficulties, because they're the ones that will, you know, cause them the greater stress in terms of the day-to-day teaching. And we don't want them sort of walking out after the first term because they feel they haven't been able to cope.